Okay, shall we start, Debusri?
Yes, please, Sucharita.
Okay, so this plenary session is going to be chaired by Sayantan Dasgupta. Sayantan Dasgupta is an associate professor at the Department of Comparative Literature at Jadavpur University, Kolkata, India.
The second speaker in this session is Sri Subrata Kumar Dash. Subrata Babu is a critic, an essayist, an editor, a translator, and an organizer. He has 27 books to his credit, a member of the Writers Union of Canada and the Literary Translators Association of Canada. His latest Bangla book on Canadian literature has been hugely acclaimed by the Bangla literature lovers living in Canada as well as the world at large. He is also the person behind Bangladeshi novels, bdnovels.org, which is the first such website on Bangla literature, which started in 2003. And his topic today, so something that is very interesting for all of us, the presence of the Bengalis in Canadian literature. We will go on to the second speaker first, and then maybe take the questions and inputs for all the speakers, for both the speakers together. Is that okay, Shucharitadi?
That's fine. And Shantan, meanwhile, those who have questions could write them in the chat box.
Yes, yes. Please do that. That will make it more convenient for us to have the speakers address those questions later. So I will now invite Sri Subrata Kumar Dash. Subrata Babu, over to you. Sir, you are on mute. Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor Sayantan Dasgupta. It is really nice to get you as the chair of this session. And good morning from Toronto. This is really a very bad time for every one of us as we are going through pandemic. But so far my personal experience goes on, I see that it is not that very bad a time for the writers, because the writers are actually getting more time to work on their writings at this time. Though it is true that whenever it is writing, it actually comes from the head, the brain, the mind, and the deaths around, the sufferings around are actually hampering every writer to concentrate on their stuff. I'm really very grateful to Canadian Center for Canadian Studies of Jadavpur University that they have invited me. When Professor Devasri contacted me and told me to set a topic for this session, I instantly decided that I'll be talking on the presence of the Bengalis in Canadian literature. It was because whenever it is Canadian literature, it is very interesting to all of us because the center is associated with Canadian studies, and with the guys, we are actually living and talking from Canada. But I thought that if it is related to the Bengali people, Bengali culture, then it would be more interesting to all the viewers, the attendees of this conference. Now I'm going to my presentation, the presence of the Bengalis in Canadian literature. Madhurima, the next slide. Whenever there is the question of Canadian literature, we all know that Canada is a country of the immigrants. And when the immigrant writers write books, it actually comes out of their own experiences. The experiences that they did have in their back home countries, or the experiences that they heard of from their parents. And if we look into Canadian literature, we will find that there are people from all the nationalities of the world. I want to say all. Might be some 5 or 10 nationalities of the world, they haven't immigrated to Canada or haven't write on their own experiences, but it is almost all, I should say. If I narrow down my focus to the Asian experiences, we will find that there are the Chinese immigrants, the Japanese, the Vietnamese, the Indian, the Bangladeshi, and I am citing those names only because when the Chinese people actually write, they write about their experiences of China or the experiences that they do have. In most cases, it happened, they do have in the Chinese communities in Canada. Whenever it is regarding the Japanese, let me show this book. This is Obasan, written by Joy Kogaya. And it is written on the experiences of a Japanese community, based on the Japanese community. And the interesting thing is, this book had been awarded with the Governor General Award, which is the highest prize for literature in Canada, I should say, at least from the government. Or when it is about the Vietnamese experience, you see, this book is written by Kim Tu. Kim Tu, she's from Montreal. There is Rahul. He knows Kim Tu much more than I know. And Ru was the first book by Kim. And I must say that Kim is the person who actually left or escaped from Vietnam with her parents at a very tender age, at some 8 or 9 years. And when she wrote this book, we found that this book is actually on the experiences of her back home, the back home family, back home things, back home stuff, etc. And when I'm just trying to narrow my things gradually, and when it is on Indian experiences, you'll see this one, Vivek Sraya. Vivek is one of the very most prominent writers of Canada at the moment, and his this book, I don't know whether I should say his or her, I'm not sure. She of the Mountains. And if we just let me read a few lines from the beginning of this book. How does Vivek starts his book? In the beginning, there is no he, there is no she. Two cells make up one cell. This is the mathematics behind creation. 1 + 1 makes 1. Life begets life. We are the period to a sentence, the effect to a cause, always belonging to someone. We are never our own. That is why we are so lonely. I just wanted to read out from this book just to make you interested in Vivek's book. And these sort of things we find in Canadian literature very frequently. Madhurima, next slide. And even Madhurima?
Yeah, thank you,
Yes,
Madhurima.
yes. Thank you very much. And even you see that when we talk about the presence of the Bengalis in Canadian literature, we actually have to look into the history. When did the Bengalis came to Canada, and when did they start writing, joining the writing community in Canada? In the presentation, in the slide, you see that if we look back to the history, we will find that one of the very earliest, you know, that at the very beginning, the Bengali people, they didn't come to Canada as the immigrants. Rather, they did it for a visit. And one of the very earliest visitors was Swami Vivekananda. It was 1893, and you know that he actually came to give a speech in Chicago. And on his way to Chicago, he actually visited Vancouver, and we get some information regarding this in his biographies, in his letters, etc. And later on, I myself has discovered one Bengali book which was written somewhat in 1907, because the year of publication isn't mentioned there. And that very writer, the name of the writer is not given on the book that I have got a copy of. And I don't know if anywhere in the world there is any other copy which can give the name of the writer. And that writer, he actually visited to Japan, and from there he went to America, and on his way to the USA, he actually had been in Vancouver for a long time. And in the book, I have got some 40 to 50 pages description on Vancouver. I am just giving the information regarding this because I want to go back to my point. Later on, you know that it was Rabindranath Tagore who visited Canada in 1929. But the fact is that Rabindranath, right after he's getting the Nobel Prize, he actually took a very horrendous decision. And the decision was that I will never visit the unkindest Canada ever in my life. It was because of the Komagata Maru incident, which was in 1914, in some 5 or 6 months, right after Tagore's getting the Nobel Prize. Because Komagata Maru came to Vancouver, you all know all this. And the passengers couldn't get down, and they had been given back. They had to go to Jadavpur, and the British police attacked on the ship. A huge number of people were injured, were killed, and Rabindranath was very much angry to this event, to this incident. But later on, he visited Vancouver in 29 when he was invited to give his speech at an education conference. Afterwards, we find that right after the independence of India, some of the intellectuals, scholars, physicians, they actually started to immigrate to Canada. And later on, a good bunch of Bengali people came to Canada as immigrant from Germany. It was during the years 1964, 5, 6, you know. Then the then Prime Minister of Canada, he actually simplified the immigration laws of Canada, and the Bengali people who had been in Germany, they tried to take the opportunity. And afterwards, this was the case mostly of the Bengalis of West Bengal, but later on, the Bengalis of Bangladesh, we find that they started to migrate to Canada after the assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the founding father of Bangladesh. And during the 1980s, they started. Madhurinma, next. We find that afterwards, one or two or three or five people started to join the Canadian writing community. And the foremost one I should mention is Professor Bimal Krishna Motilal. We all know that he had been a professor of Toronto University, U of T, from 1965 to 76. And he had been one of the foremost writers of the Bengali community living in Canada then. And he wrote in Bengali as well as in English. And the other one is Himani Banerjee. And Himani has been serving as the professor of York University. And I must say that Himani is the topmost intellectual of the Bengali community living in Canada. She has got scholarly books, research books, novels, poetry, etc., to her credit. And the thing is that Himani started her writing career as a poet. It was in 1986. Her first book of poetry, Doing Time, came out, and later on, the first one was in 82. It was A Separate Sky, and Doing Time. The second one came in 86, and her first novel, Colored Pictures, came out in 1991. The second one, Her Mother's Ashes, in 94. And the point is that most of our books are research books, scholarly books. Madhurima, next. And we find that among the Bengali community writers, the most prominent, most popular, most noteworthy one is Bharati Mukherjee. And she has got some 9-10 novels to her credit. And you know that Bharati, when Bharati had been writing, here my point is, when Bharati had been writing, most of our novels were set in India, in West Bengal. The Desirable Daughters, Jasmine, all the books. The last one, Miss New India, all books actually had taken Indian characters, Bengali characters, and the life that Bharati had been describing there were the Bengali life, the life that Bharati had lived earlier. And the Tree Bride, if I am allowed to read out from Tree Bride, it is at page 39. How does she says, last December, on my last night with my parents in Rishikesh, my mother, now resident with Parkinson's, began a story about the Tree Bride. You all know that this was a very common, what should I say, not a ritual, but a misconception of the Bengalis much back, The Tree Bride. My parents hadn't known I was writing a book. When I mentioned my interest in any stories of The Tree Bride, she might still know. My mother tried to lift her hand as though to stop all other conversation. Only one admonishing finger rose from her fist. Her tongue was slow and heavy, her face a mask of stone. Only her eyes were still alert and impatient with what her lips and tongue could not do. If I deciphered her correctly, she said, Taralata and the English writer. I read out from there because I just wanted to show you when the immigrant Canadian writers write, they actually take their themes, their stories, their plots from their own back home days, back home country. Madhurima next. And alongside Bharati Mukherjee, who are the most noteworthy fiction writers and novel writers from the Bengali community, Bengali origin in Canada. Number one is Rana Bose. His very recent novel is Fog. And Rana is actually from Montreal. I believe Rahul knows Rana because Rana is also a playwright. He has written a good number of plays. I will tell it later. The other one is In the Name of Love. I must mention that Rana's Fog, it is not about the Bengali life, not about the British life, but Rana's first novel, the very first one, it was about the Bengali life, the Kolkata life. And the name of the first one was Recovering Route. And the second novel that Rana wrote is The Fourth Canvas, and it was his third novel. And the next one, In the Name of Love, the same thing happened. The characters are from Kolkata, though this one, Waiting for the Man, Arjun Bosu's very recent novel, this is not about the Bengali things, and I must say that Arjun's this book, this was in the long list of the $100,000 prize, and this is possibly the only book written by any Bengali Canadian who has got this sort of honor. And very recently, we have got a Bangladeshi Canadian writer's The Storm, and you will be very happy to know that in Storm, we found that the protagonist of this book, he actually lives in New York, and the novelist flashes back to Bangladesh, to Kolkata during the 1940s, 50s, and gradually the story evolves out. And the most very interesting thing of Arif Anwar is that it is really very interesting. I want to show you this. He has used like this. He has used the Bengali alphabet in his book. He is the first one who has done this. This is O, Shore O. And gradually it comes to A, and it comes to Anna, because the name of the daughter of the protagonist is Anna, and the protagonist is actually trying to teach his daughter the Bengali language, and the thing has come out in this way in this novel. And this is really very interesting that Arif dared to do this. He has inserted some Bangla words from the Bengali alphabet. Madhurima, the next. And alongside the novels, we have found that there have been a good number of poets from the Bengali origin whose books have been published from Canada. And the most important one is Aisha Chatterjee. This is Aisha's book, Bottles and Bones. And I must mention that Aisha had served as the president of Canadian League of Poets, which is not a very ordinary position to hold. And a very important poet now from the Bengali origin is Gandhar Chakraborty, Gandhar. And you'll be happy to know that Gandhar is the son of very noted Bengali poet Ashok Chakraborty, who lives in Canada and Montreal as well. And Gandhar's this book, he has got another book. The name of that book is the Maple Vedas. Vedas, the ancient Indian Vedas, and Maple Vedas mean the Canadian Vedas. He wanted to mean it. And if I'm allowed to read out a few lines from Kolkata Dreams, which is from the poem California to Kolkata. There, Gandhar writes, so he discovered no city of joy, but a city somewhere in its future, the gap between the poor and rich as thick as Buddha's belly. The gap between poor and rich as thick as Buddha's belly. Yes, Gandhar has experienced this in Calcutta, and he has written it in a Canadian poetry book. And the other poets noteworthy to mention is Kaushalya Banerjee, Shabbashachi Nag. This is Shabbashachi's book. And Doyali Islam, might be you have heard the name of Doyali. Doyali is a very promising poet of Canada now. Her origin is Bangladesh, a Bangladeshi Bengali, and her latest book, Heft, it has been hailed by the Canadian poets very much hugely. And there are other poets as well. There is Promatagar, Punit Dutt, and we are very happy that these Bengali origin writers, they have established their own positions in the Canadian writing community. This is really very noticeable, noteworthy, and very happy for us. Madhurima, next. And if we go to the non-fiction writers, we will find that there is the York professor, Janam Mukherjee, and this book has come out from a Canadian publishing house, very popular, very important publishing house. It is Hungry Bengal. You can understand that Hungry Bengal is on the history, on the tragedies that happened in Bengal during the 1940s. And Janam has written this very scholarly book, very nicely written book, and it has been published from Canada, from Toronto. And the next one I want to show, because I actually, so far I have learned, I have seen that the number of nonfiction writers from the Bengali origin is a bit less. And this one is by Durga Chiu Bose. Durga was actually born in Kolkata, and this was about her experience and her challenges during her growing up. And it was also very much hailed by the Canadian readers. Madhurima, next. And the name that I told before was Rana Bose, the Bengali playwright. And it is really very interesting to know that Rana, he has written some 11 plays by now. The first one came in 1992, and the name was On the Double. Later on, his Death of Abby Hoffman and other plays, Beyond Bollywood and Broadway, Tribes, all these plays came out. And I don't know how many other playwrights from the Bengali community we do get in Canada, but I must say that Rana is one of the very forefront playwrights from the Bengali community. I believe that in future we'll get more writers from the Bengali community who will show up in Canadian literature and make we the people more proud. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Subrata Babu. I think as Bengalis, many of us are often very excited about hearing about how Bengal features in the world. I remember one of our friends, Mridula Nath Chakraborty, who came out with this book recently, which is called Being Bengali at Home and in the World. I think some of the things that you spoke about vibed very well with us. It was a very interesting catalogue of writers in Canada with a Bengali connection. And I'm sure that is very interesting and exciting, a corpus to look forward to for many of us. It was very heartening for us to hear of Himani Banerjee's name, because Himani at one point of time used to teach in the Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur
Yes, I
University,
know
many
that.
years ago, of course. Yes. So, and she's been a pillar of support to the Center for Canadian Studies, also, as Shucharita will vouch. So, thank you very much for that very informative presentation.